Hey, everybody, this is Afterwords with Dani, and if you're Dani, it's Afterwords with Emily. And we are doing this just a couple days after, day or two after we put out our usual sort of bi-weekly show because there's just such a fantastic shit show presented to us on the Joe Rogan podcast last night that we felt we had to comment because two Jewish girls always have to comment about everything. Anyway, so I have two things. Well, first, two things I want to say. There's part of me that I'm torn between doing this or just saying like, fuck it, this is such a shit show, you have to see it to understand, or doing like a 10-hour podcast where we like analyze all of the stuff. I mean, this was a shit show of spectacular proportions. And like literally, like there are so many things I could comment on that I was just in Whole Foods, and I'm going to tell you about Whole Foods in a second. And while I'm in there, I had like 12 amazing insights that I wanted to share with you. And I've already forgotten what they are because there are so many things going on in this situation. This is like, you know how like with the French braid, you have like over here, this area of hair, and over here in the middle, and you're pulling pieces from each and making the thing. This is the most spectacular French braid of like multicolored weaved haired bullshit that, but with some startling like truths, if you can catch them in between the bullshit, that I was just like, wow, man, this is like, I'm almost in awe of what this was if I weren't so disgusted, right? It's like, I can't decide if I love this or I hate this, right? So
it feels like this one took it to a new level of like brilliant, important insight and complete disinformation and propaganda. And look over here and look over here. And it was huge, this one.
So I've decided the only way I can deal with this is if I just kind of respond to the points that you think are important, because for me, my mind's just going, I'm into so many side lanes with so many people about so many topics right now. And there's something in this that kind of goes into all of them. So my mind is everywhere. But before we get into this, I just have to tell you, whatever the invasion is, it's happening at Whole Foods. That's where the invasion is coming from. Okay. I was just like, and this goes to your Amazon portal to hell, all that kind of stuff thing. I was just in Whole Foods briefly. I had to pick up a few things. And I've been to Whole Foods many, many times since all the bullshit nonsense has been going on. There was something there today that I have not seen before. Literally, the store was full. There was no social distancing going on, which to me, that's great. Whatever. The store was loaded with people. Even though they're still having you wait in line outside, there's tons of people in there. But almost half of them are in the same uniform. And it's not the people that work here that have the little apron. It's like this crazy black uniform where they look sort of like an umpire in a baseball game, right? And so I didn't know.
Black and white stripes or all black?
No, it's just like they have like on like normal clothes, like maybe blue jeans and black pants and like a t-shirt, maybe red or blue, but they have like knee pads on and elbow pads, and they're all wearing the same black mask and whatever. And I'm in the bathroom. I go into the bathroom and I see somebody's left their cell phone on the sink. So it looked weird to me, right? Like it looked like either the cell phone of someone that worked there or the cell phone of someone who worked for Amazon Prime, who does the Instacart or something. So I was going back and forth between like, okay, is this person just in the bathroom and they intentionally left it here on the counter, which felt weird because it wasn't even a regular counter. It was like right in the sink. Or did somebody who needs it because for their job, who works here or works for Amazon, leave it here? And I just picked it up and I'm right in the back near where you go into the back of the store where the people work are. So I just hand it to the guy and say, like, I found this in the bathroom. He looks at me, he's like, is this your phone? I'm like, no, I found it in the bathroom. I don't want him to lose it. Okay. So then I go back into the bathroom and I'm waiting because all the stalls are full. And a girl comes out with the phone in her hand, and her phone in her hand looked exactly like the one that I had just picked up and had the same screen on it. Like the screen was on the phone that I had saved, and it said something like Home, Whole Foods, Porter Ranch, something Amazon, right? That's why it led me to believe it belonged to somebody working. So the girl who comes out of the other bathroom walks out with the same exact phone in her hand. So it's not her phone, right? So then the next girl that comes out of the other bathroom comes out, and I had gone in the previous person's bathroom, and this other girl comes out. She's like, "Oh, where's my phone?" Right? So I told her, I gave it to this guy and whatever. So of the 3 stalls that were in the bathroom, 2 of them were people who were in these outfits and with these phones. That's the first time I noticed it. Then I go out and I realize that everyone in every aisle is one of these people with these phones. and they're all looking at these phones and taking orders, and they're phones that have like a huge kind of rubber case around them, so they're very well protected, but it's like a phone that is giving you directives, right? Like, and this thing with Amazon and Prime and people doing your shopping has been going on for a while. Why all of a sudden today at this time is the store just overrun with them, right? And it was just, I'm like, this is fucking weird, dude. I wonder what these people do with these phones when they're not working at the supermarket, right? Are these the same fucking phones that are commanding people to show up and throw a brick through a window for $25 in Ethereum? Right?
Probably.
People all looked like some sort of weird, something you'd see on like one of these futuristic TV shows on Amazon Prime, right? Like, or whatever. They just looked weird, and they were all taking commands from their little thing, and it was so weird. I'd say that it was like 3-to-1 people were like that in the store to normal people.
I mean, shit is going crazy. This weekend is going to be crazy with the eclipse and whatnot. It's just all amping up. I would not be surprised that—
an article that said that actually they miscalculated, and 2012 was this weekend. The world ending in 2012 was actually this weekend.
Well, that's what it feels like. I keep getting these things about like China's about to take out 90% of the population when they attack us. P.S. Since the last time we spoke, I've been completely deplatformed from Tumblr, and I had a podcast interview I did with another organization pulled because of my perspectives on Black Lives Matter. I don't know what my perspectives are beyond the fact that like the movement is funded by some shady people, but the censorship machine seems to be really amped up.
Mm-hmm. So you like what was this podcast for?
Fuck it. It's called Sakara Life. They're like these like it's always the same, like wealthy, new age, healthy lifestyle. It was all about quantum languaging. It was great, but they said they were very concerned about who they partner with right now. And I said, I totally understand. Have you done your research into who's funding Black Lives Matter? Have you read their mission statement? But I'm the problem. Yeah. Anyway,
on with the show here.
On with the show. So you sent me Joe Rogan, and my first question was it new? Because it's so hard to listen to him now. And I love Brett Weinstein. And as I said on our last show, I really appreciate what he and Heather Heying have been saying about the race stuff. So I listened the first 45 minutes. I thought it was awesome. And I made the mistake of reaching out to Brett and tweeting, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. I was like, totally premature. And what he was saying was so important as far as Black Lives Matter. It's not about not wanting racial equality. It's about this particular movement is pretty shady, and the fact that they're pushing to defund the police so hardcore is very concerning, and all the other aspects. So I was really into what he was saying. And I liked how he broke down, like, both the left and the right are corrupt. You cannot, this is not a partisan thing anymore. And you can no longer align yourself with the left. Like, he broke that down in such an intelligent way. And then you had Joe playing the buffoon and throwing in all of the obvious sort of like virtue signaling oppositions, and it just felt stupid and canned, and I didn't believe it, and he was so outraged. And it seemed like Brett was poking around, like, we don't know if he died, we don't know if this was a murder. And I really appreciated that, because who was filming, you know, all those other pieces. And Joe was just like hook, line, and sinker outraged. I thought Brett handled it really well. But then, so first part where he went crazy is where, P.S. they kept ripping Trump. And that also struck me as weird, is like, what does Trump have anything to do with this? And why did Brett have to keep finding reasons to take Trump down? So then he's talking about the political system and how we're screwed because now we're at the point where it looks like it's going to be Trump and Biden, and that's not really a choice. So what we need to do, he had his like dark horse partnership where you have someone from the left and someone from the right coming in as an independent party, as an independent ticket, and for 4 years, one of them will take the lead, and then in 4 years, they'll switch. And his brilliant idea for who should be the left person for this is exactly. You guys can't see it, but Emily's freaking out on camera. It's Andrew Yang.
Right, equally as genius as who his person from the right should be. Right, okay.
I didn't even know who his person from the right should be, but what was it was just so insane. It's like, yes, let's pick someone with no political experience whatsoever. And I also loved how he kept defining Andrew Yang as a patriot. Like trying to redefine that word and trying to connect that word to Andrew Yang, which makes no sense because no patriot would push a socialist agenda upon us. So that was the first part where I started like choking on the eyeballs that had rolled back so far in my head that they fell down my throat.
Okay, so you just gave me a big bowl of eyeball stew, and so let me see if I can address the various points. So yeah, I felt like the first part was pretty good, and then like it started to get a little weird when Brett started to poke around about some of that stuff. I will have to say that also in
some of which stuff?
Huh? That about the like, you know, are we sure we saw a murder? Right? Now, the way he sort of then explained it away when Joe challenged him on some of it, I didn't care for. Like, I think there was more.
He backed off too easily.
He backed off into the wrong corner, too. Right? So he backed off and he went into the wrong corner. He backed off into like, oh, maybe this was just policy. Not even into any questions of like, what is the veracity of what we're seeing? Where's the rest of the tape? Where there's some interesting discrepancies in this person's background, right? So I think he wanted to test the waters to see if Joe would shrink him into a conspiracy theorist or not, if he could use his intellect to override Joe's tendency to laugh people off as conspiracy theorists. And when it didn't happen, he shrunk back into the corner, and not only the corner, but the wrong corner. Right?
Exactly. And I think that's really key to remember, like, because he was so, I love how emotionally intelligent he is, and I liked how he was trying to lead Joe, and when he saw Joe wouldn't go there, he just completely pussied out.
Right. So there was that, and then the next thing you said, I felt like compared to some things I've seen, there wasn't that much Trump bashing in this. Actually, I felt like there was just one segment, really.
Maybe no, I was tracking it. It was a light sprinkling throughout the whole thing. And also notice how Joe has all of a sudden become anti-Trump. He'd been pretty neutral, right? He'd been playing both sides. And in this one, the first thing Brett said was like, make America great again. And that again was a deliberate attack on Black and brown people for whom it was never great. And I was like, you just took like 30 leaps of illogic in pinning that on Trump. And that was just one of, they were just sprinkled throughout.
They were sprinkled, like I felt, so I think that Joe's position probably is shifting because maybe he is going to get behind this idea. Ultimately, he didn't seem that super excited about it, but
you wait. This is going to be his new thing.
I think he might shift or might like go for, I like this idea, but with maybe one or two different people in it, right? Like I think he likes this Josh.
He didn't mention Tulsi. He didn't mention anyone else who was actually qualified to govern. He was just like, Yang, yes, brilliant.
No, first he was like Jocko Willink and The Rock, right? So whatever it is, I think that like they're tossing this idea out there in a kind of playful way to see if people will bite on this, right? To see if like if there will be some sort of movement created. They've been throwing out a couple things I've noticed in the sort of borderline alternative media podcast, a few ideas they're checking to see if people will get behind, right? Like they're doing a little sort of like, you know, when they call it when a shark does an exploratory bite to see if what it is, if it's like a seal or a person or a surfboard, and then they do the throw it up in the air and chomp it and kill it, right? Okay. So
I don't buy it. I feel like this was in the design from the get-go, and probably part of the reason why they went with such a doofus like Biden to bring it back around to
the overall thing. Yes, I think what they're testing is the method of deployment of whatever the thing is going to be. So I think they're throwing out various ways that they could deploy it, right? So
yes.
Okay, so I think that's what's going on there. So then the thing you said was. You got into another thing after Trump. You went into, shit, I lost it, and it was important. So you went.
I went Trump
into.
Okay.
You went into the Andrew Yang thing, and so to me, like the Andrew Yang thing is like, yes, we already know that the Weinsteins are for Andrew Yang, and that Joe Rogan is sort of playing that thing too. But his idea of the person who the center right person should be was General McRaven, who was in charge of the Osama bin Laden kill kill, sure, in Pakistan, okay, if you count killing a body that's already dead and throwing it into the ocean as a, a tactical, so right there to me, with all of Brett's intellect and all of Brett's, at this point, should be suspicion of authority, the fact that he hasn't done any looking into what really happened there at the compound in Pakistan, I was just like, wow, all right, this is so I can't fucking figure out, because here's the thing. I do agree with you. I think Brett, whatever the thing is, the little, intellectual dark web cabal that his brother is more involved in than he is, like to wheel him out to use him because he has a certain kind of more caring intellect, right? He's a little bit more of a heart-centered person than the other people of the intellectual dark web. And so and he seems more genuinely curious in understanding reality and blah, blah, blah. So they wheel him out because it's a way to get you and I to be excited, to watch a podcast that we'd normally have written off on a certain level, but also because there's something just more human about him than there are about a lot of the other members of their sort of crew, right? But
and he's also not as egoically driven. He's not like the attention hog that the others are.
Yeah, he's heart-centered, and I think he is genuinely interested in having conversations with people and whatnot. Now, I don't know if they wheel him out because he's under super good mind control, to the point where he does what he just did, and people like you and I also still think, there's something about him we like. It's a really good mind control, or whether he's really still he's still safe to do this with because he's really still far more asleep than we think he is. We think he's awake, but he's really only awake on one or two topics, and he hasn't figured out how to research anything with those, right? So it could be that one. Or is it just we're all super snowed and he's just as full of shit as the others? Yeah.
No. Okay, this is what it is. Did you ever see the Eric Weinstein Portal episode where he interviewed Brett?
No, I can't watch Eric Weinstein. I told you how I feel about him before. He's just too gross.
I get it. So that podcast revealed everything. Eric Weinstein lords over Brett like an evil dictator. And I think I told you about it.
You told me about it. Yeah, you did tell me.
Yeah, it was so cringy to watch how much he bullied him and how much Brett, as the little brother, wants his brother's approval. So I feel like the gross powers that be, we know that Eric sold out to Soros whenever he sold out Soros, but he told us on his first podcast. So my sense is that Eric took advantage of his relationship with Brett to pull Brett in to shilling for this Soros Yang thing. I feel like Brett is authentically qualified to speak to this race thing because of his experience at Evergreen and because of why he left. I'm not sure if it was Harvard or Yale before because of the racial thing. So I feel like that works to his advantage.
University of Pennsylvania, not Harvard or Yale. It was University of Pennsylvania, I think. Or something.
Okay, and he left because of this racial thing through his fraternity. So this was really interesting the way it was designed, because it was designed to get people like you and me who aren't buying in to the BLM thing, who aren't buying, because we're not racist, so we're not buying into this whole thing. We're just kind of watching, and he's speaking intelligently to the threat of civil war and all of that. But then he throws in this Yang socialism thing, and then he goes into the virus as being, that was just crazy. And he starts pulling for this really intense 6 week.
He's also, that's the setup. So a couple of things.
That is the setup.
So first of all, there was a lot of reasonable things woven into his thing about the virus, and he's
that's what's so frustrating about the sham, is there's so many reasonable things mixed in with so many crazy things.
He said so many reasonable things, and then he said so many things that it's are you unable to read? Right? Are you unable to read? And are you really that gullible that you trust these fucking fools? And you're both okay with a lot, telling a lie to service a greater truth. I'm not okay with any of that shit, right? Because that would have been, Fauci originally lied about the masks because he didn't want them to be a run on them, so then there wouldn't be there for the medical people, right?
Exactly. It's they take these leaps as though we're supposed to believe them. It's such an insult to the intelligence.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. if Brett really did, like, sometimes we think of people as very advanced because they're very intelligent, but if he really did just start waking up 2 years ago when the thing went down for him, right? Think about the kind of dumb mistakes you were making in your analysis of things and in who you trusted 2 years into your waking up, right? Like we all were like believing some dumb shit, right? And we all were like,
of course.
Yeah. So, okay.
But it's like, why is he speaking to this? You know, like, he's not qualified to be speaking to this. He clearly hasn't done his research.
Well, I feel like he's done the research on certain things that are like his general, like that, like tickle the cerebral, like the thing he's kind of into on a certain level. But he, in the same conversation and mouthful of words, he says how we have a problem with the corruption and funding of studies, right? So he's well enough aware of all that. But he doesn't talk about how, like, the same, like, corruption is that these things are being created at American universities. These viruses are being created or amplified at American universities, and then when they get told not to do that anymore here, then they just give a fund over to China, right? So he's absolving, like, he's not, like, all you had to do was go one page further in your research and you would have gotten to the next layer, which was like North Carolina. Right, the lab at North Carolina where a lot of this emanates from, right? And so, okay, so there was that, and then he gets into, and this was like, to me, so I think I'm going to title this show as my new line, Gain of Function is the New Active Shooter Drill, right? So
Gain of Function is the new active shooter drill?
Yeah, so all of these, he's talking about, like, the people who are earnestly in these labs researching these viruses to, you know, to try and help humanity for in case a pandemic comes. Like, the way that they do it is by, like, amplifying it. They try and do something called gain of function, right? They amplify it and they try and see if they can get it to do another thing, right? So it can do the next obvious thing. That's kind of like when, like, the FBI or Homeland Security or whatever, FEMA does a drill, and then the thing that they're doing the drill for happens, right? And so, to me, like, we could probably do away with all school shootings and most terrorist attacks if we just ended drills from the FBI and Homeland Security. It's the same thing, right? It's like, okay, all of these people are getting grants to perform gain of function studies, and then this is not even addressing the fact that he thinks this might have been like an accident. Oops, it got out of the lab and not like in a, you know, right? So that
it actually came from a bat. Like, he's like legitimately buying into that and then spending all this time and energy and words talking about it like that's real.
Right. So, you know, and then he goes into, and then at the very end, he talks about his experience with the bat thing he was studying, and then what happened with the mouse telomeres, and talked about how he just can't believe that, like, he presented a truth to someone and they blew him off, so that everybody believes, right, this person knows about that kind of corruption. And so if he's not seeing that corruption here, it must not be there, because he knows what it's like to be on the shitty end of, like, trying to scream truth and having everybody blow you off.
Exactly. That was what was so frustrating about the sham. To have both he and Joe whine about being called alt-right for being so out there. It was just so frustrating to watch.
Well, the whole thing was just so, like, I just didn't even know. I was like, wow, like, this is the first time in probably 6 months I've listened to an entire Joe Rogan podcast. I just literally finished it right before we started. But it was just because, like, there was, like, a pattern to the way the bullshit was being weaved. It was
really deliberate. Someone designed that, and it wasn't Joe and it wasn't Brett.
At one point, Brett said, like, because they had gotten into the virus or something else for a bit, and he's like, I want to get back to talking about the Dark Horse Duo. And Joe's like, no, talk about the virus. Right? So there was, like, sometimes I feel like, just like I used to think with Alex Jones, they're getting their fucking CIA commands in their ear, right? Like,
totally.
It's just voice to skull or whatever.
And it was weird that he was like, yeah, talk about the virus. Like, why would Brett Weinstein talk about the virus? He's not qualified to talk about the virus. His opinion about the virus is as bullshit as yours or mine.
So I'd say that since all of us, every single person on planet Earth has been talking about the virus, right? Like, Joe has talked about it with almost everyone who's been on his show for the past 3 months. I'd go out on a limb and say Brett might be slightly more qualified to talk about it because he does understand some elements about the way things evolve biologically, but clearly from what he showed us, he's not qualified, right? But since everybody else was talking about it, but this is the other thing that I think that they're trying to, like, the point of him being like militant about this idea of a harsh 6-week lockdown, because I think that's what it's going to be when the quote unquote second wave comes, right? And so I think they're sort of like pre-programming, you know.
100%. 100%. That was all pre-programming.
Yeah. So that when it comes, and this time it's not, there's not going to be getting food from restaurants or, you know, going to the store with your fucking mask. It's going to be literally like, you have to pay 30% more to have shit delivered to you through Amazon Prime, you know what I mean, or whatever, if you fucking want anything. And if not, tough shit, you have to go get in like a government line for something, right? There's not going to be, it's not going to be like, I think they're sort of trying to like make it so that when, if and when this occurs, people will defend it, right? And you have Brett there saying, and this is hard for me because I'm really concerned about civil liberties, right? I'm just like, dude, if you fucking think that fucking former general who fucking was involved in the fakery of a you know, terrorist, you know, of catching a terrorist in order to help push Obama over the edge to win the election because it was in danger after his handling of some other things that had happened. You know, like this whole thing was just like, he's not concerned about civil liberties. Like he just just sold out.
He just sold out and jumped into the same pockets.
Well, even dumber, I don't know if he's sold out or not. He just got drafted in, and he's not, like, sold out generally implies that you're like going to get well compensated. I think he may just be drafted like into the military, and maybe if he's lucky at the end of this, he'll get to go to college on the GI Bill.
Oh no, he just got his brother's approval. Like that's it.
Oh, that's
he
it.
got
Okay.
his brother to say good job. That was what he sold out for.
Okay.
But it was really, really a train wreck of a podcast.
But
really
so entertaining. So like when I was on the way home I like went out to pick up my meat from my grass-fed rancher and whatever. And when I was between there and Whole Foods, I called the Crimmies. I do some shows with the Crimmies, and they like you too. And I was like, there was something in there that fed into a theory that I was talking about with them last night. And I can't speak yet well enough, like intelligently enough to tell you where I'm going with all this. But like they even brought up, oh, this is really fucking interesting to have him on, because I told them to go watch it, right? And they didn't even know who Brett Weinstein was. So while we're on the phone, they're looking up Brett Weinstein. They're like, oh, this is interesting. Brett Weinstein, this thing happened to him at Evergreen College. That's where the fucking virus broke out, at the Evergreen Nursing Home in Washington. Right? So this is like some more of that cool, like repetitive simulation bullshit.
Right.
And there's something going on with the therapies that are going to be offered for this. And I'm cluing into it. And it has like, this is so, remember when I was talking about how the simulation is coded for something and it expresses itself in multiple ways, because you had like the Hurricane Harvey, and you had the Harvest Festival and the Harvey Weinstein thing, and the Harvey Weinstein thing happened at the same time as the Brett Weinstein thing. So there was something like, you know, like something going on with all of these, because we do live in a universe that's coded by language. You explain that to people beautifully, that it brings reality into existence. But there are so many crossovers between the thing with the virus, the thing with the riots, and things that are going on in science behind the scenes, and things that we're starting to learn about parallel universes and resonance and how you cross between them, that this is the best shit show ever, right? Like right? There's just so many flying fecal facts about this that it's just like
so many flying fecal facts. I love that.
So guys, go listen to this Joe Rogan podcast and just see how many of them you can catch, right? Like
yeah, I'd be curious for our folks to like catch like truth. It's like here's an amazing truth, and here comes the disinformation, and they're just like so deftly woven in and interlapping, and that's not a word, overlapping.
I can't even remember like at least 10 of the insights I had either while listening or while reflecting while I was battling off the cyborgs and Whole Foods. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've had thoughts that I can't even remember right now. So I'd love
it was it was so many. And the way they would bounce off one another, like Brett would say something true and then Joe would be right in there with some disinformation unless people got too excited about that. And it was just like perfectly choreographed.
I mean, like it was like, you know, like when you try to do your own French braid and it looks sloppy, but then someone like, I don't know, like you think of someone that we both knew and did gymnastics with, someone like Stephanie Lesueur's mom could French braid perfectly. Her hair always looked like perfectly even and did it right. Like whatever, right? There was always those people, right? So it's like, this was one of those. This was like one of the stage moms from like, you know, what's that fucking show with the little kids who do like the modeling and the dancing and they have like a reality show about their pushy moms.
Asking me about a TV show?
No, but what do you know what I'm talking about? Like one of those fucking overbearing moms whose kids' hair always looks perfect, French braided this fucking episode of
of shit showness extraordinaire.
Yeah, you know, so, but I mean, yeah.
I just think it's important for us to stay apprised of like how yet again, the like CCP Chinese communist infiltration continues to come in completely unabated through the left, even though they claim to be accused of being alt-right. Like it's still, that flow hasn't even slowed.
Like a combination of this, that and the fucking Yuri Bezmenov's Soviet, you know, demoralization campaign. It's both. Right. And so that's part of the French braid. Like it's the French braid of like the Soviet demoralization, the Chinese communist propaganda bullshit. And then this idea of sort of like American exceptionalism, right? It's like a braid, you know what I mean? Like kind of thing like that, you know, this is,
it was so like, crazy to see Brett speaking like, allegedly honoring America and honoring the American experience and allegedly speaking as a patriot. And then he completely turned and was like, and let's destroy our democracy and rescind everyone's civil liberties.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings me to one other thing that I wanted to speak to that I meant to mention in our last thing, but I forgot because we just got off into other things and it felt complete. I want to address what I said in our previous show, not the one the other day, about not really being into the Constitution. And I also, I want to do that, and I want to talk about my feelings about patriotism as well. Okay, so when I said that I'm not really into the Constitution, it doesn't mean that I don't think that some of the ideals that are expressed in the Constitution are good and important. I do. Obviously, I believe in freedom of speech, I believe in freedom of association, I believe in privacy, I believe in all this kind of stuff. I don't like the idea. So for me, one of the things that I'm constantly dealing with and sort of trying to manage how I want to respond to is this idea that writing something on paper makes it so, right? Like, okay. And also like I didn't participate in writing the Constitution. I didn't sign it. I didn't agree to it. And this was something that was created by the same Freemasons that we blame lots of our problems on, right? And so the fact that like old men who were elites created a document that said some good things all this time ago that are not honored in any way by anyone in our government at this point anyway, right? That like people are like, when people still come to me with like, oh, but that's against the Constitution or that's anti-constitutional, it's like, duh, right? Like there's no like, you know, there's no, and when people tell me that they're like, they swore an oath to the Constitution or they're loyal to the Constitution, like, dude, this is more about like people, right? Being loyal to people, doing what's right because it's right. Like we don't have to know, you don't have to have something written on paper, right? That says like, oh, this is the right thing to do. Like as humans at this point, like I think we should sort of know that. But the other thing is if we lived in a truly free society, and I'm obvious, you and I both know that we don't, right? And I'm assuming all the listeners do, then there would be some like discussion about like, what do you think about this Constitution, right? Not just like, oh, well, somebody signed it, you know, 13 men or 12 men decided all these years ago, this is what it is and that's what it's been. And I'm not for like the Constitutional Convention or changing the Constitution or anything like that. But we haven't been living under like true, like constitutional, in a constitutional situation at all in yours and my life, right? That shit was violated a really, really long time ago. So when I'm questioning of that, it isn't me saying that those ideals don't matter. It's just that like, let's face it, like, you know, part of the spell that Americans have been under is that they're told they're free, and so they believe it, and so they don't recognize when like all of these things that are completely anti-freedom are happening sometimes.
Of course.
And to always circle back to like how wonderful the Constitution is, I think keeps people under the spell. So it isn't that I don't agree with most of what's in there, you know what I mean? And that I don't think that those things are important, but I think that it's like, when we just go, well, the Constitution says, well, okay, but obviously that's not doing anything right now. Like the fact that there is this Constitution isn't stopping this mass craziness, the lockdown bullshit, the fucking, you know, dealing with the riot. It's not handling the situation as that.
I hear what you're saying, but I feel like what you're talking about with the masks and the lockdown is it's a quantum leap in shitting on the Constitution.
Right.
And I hear what you're saying about, no, we haven't actually really been free in our lifetime. I mean, we certainly were more so in the 70s, and more rights have been rescinded. But this is what we're experiencing now, is an obliteration of the Constitution. That's not okay. And I do want to hear what you're saying about being a patriot. So I'm gonna hold my next piece until I hear
this idea that like we have to have someone who's a patriot. Like to me, like patriotism, at least in the way that it's been deployed in modern times. So like, let's say since like George Bush won, maybe Ronald Reagan, right? To me is like a mind control program. Right? Like, I don't like this idea that like, you know, it's like the swearing allegiance to a piece of paper, swearing allegiance to a piece of land or to a government that is doing all of these immoral and illegal things around the world. But somehow I still like, this is, you know, like I have questions about that. I'm one of those people, like, I've never been impressed with like men in uniform or the military. Like some people, like, you know, when you're in high school and you have some friends who are like, ooh, I love when guys look hot in their little military uniform. That shit was always a turnoff to me. I'm like, dude, that looks like an order follower of the highest magnitude. You know what I mean?
I hear what you're saying, but I feel like we need to talk about like this new iteration of patriot, because I feel the same as you. I've never felt an allegiance. I've never thought men in uniform were hot. Same. I'm just like, okay, you follow orders. You're not for me. And Justin and I were talking about this in a podcast that we did, that, you know, traveling internationally from the time being in my 20s, it was kind of like an embarrassment to be an American. And I would want to keep that under wraps because we weren't really well received. And I had ill associations with patriotism. Now, since the lockdown, since this weirdness that we're going around, patriot has reemerged in a new way, right? That has changed. That identification has changed. And right now it seems to indicate people who have an allegiance to the Constitution and to our civil liberties versus the people who are masking themselves and running around like little babies wanting, you know, the government to take care of them. And what I feel like just happened in this Brett Weinstein, Joe Rogan interview.
He tried to redefine it yet again. Yeah.
Brett Weinstein tried to take this thing that is actually referring to people who are really for freedom, and he's trying to rebrand it and trying to make
the lockdown is a freedom, like that. The lockdown is right. That I totally get.
And so that's what was gross to me about watching that, is like, ew, you just took that and you just took that identifier in that way for people to acknowledge. You know, like I went to an unmasked meeting last night. Everyone there, we're all different people, but we're bound by an allegiance to our constitutional rights to freedom. So in that sense, we're all patriots in this, you know, now. Okay. And how we're referencing it now. And I feel like what Brett did was really scuzzy in trying to take that word back and say Andrew Yang is a patriot when he is not a patriot at all.
I have no issue with your assessment of what Brett Weinstein did. Right. I think maybe what we need to do is find a better term than patriot because of the way it's been used so much, right? Like a person who is loyal or adherent to freedom for everyone, right? To some fundamental truths about reality, right? Like that to me is more like, you know, the way that patriotism has been attached to this sort of flag waving and the thing, it's hard for me at this point. You know what I mean? When I hear people talk about patriotism, because to me it involves things that I also don't agree with, right?
Well, I feel like now I hear what you're saying, and we're not going to change it now. You know, like there's so much momentum behind it. So right now it's referencing people who are for the Second Amendment, people who are for the First Amendment, people who are not willing to stand down and kneel to the sham. So I hear what you're saying. It's a loaded term. And I also have a lot of negative associations. And right now, I definitely am aligning myself as a patriot because I'm proud to have been raised in this country. And if I wasn't raised in a country where I had freedom of speech and freedom of expression, I wouldn't be as express and authentic a woman as I am now. And so I'm honoring the privilege of being brought up in this country by, in this moment, aligning myself as a patriot and aligning myself with the Constitution because it needs protecting now. It's definitely in danger. And Brett is one of the people who's endangering it. And it really infuriates me to see him attempt to take this term and tack it on to Andrew Yang and think we're all going to buy it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I have respect and I honor what you're saying. And I don't have a problem with sort of the way you're identifying and aligning with it that way. It's, you know, we have different ways that we sort of attach ourselves and connect and arrange our relationship with some of these things. But I just wanted to kind of clarify, like, it is not that, like, you know, some of those higher minded ideals of patriotism are things that I believe in as well, right? And a lot of those ideals of the Constitution. But I'm also always aware of, like, the other things attached to it and where some of these things, you know, came from. And so for me, it's just a more measured thing. So my point is, I just wanted to clarify to people that it's not, to me, I absolutely, like, this whole bullshit isn't, like, that we're going through is, like, you know, more than it is like an attack on the Constitution. It's obviously an attack on our health. Wearing a mask is not healthy, right? It's an attack on my intellect. It's an attack on common sense, right? Like, it's all of those things. And I guess in some ways, like, I don't necessarily need a Constitution to tell me that stuff, right? Like, a thinking human being. And so I guess that's my point with it. My point is not to attack the Constitution, though I do have some issues with its origin and how it's functioned. My point is that, like, you know, we actually, like, we don't need a piece of paper. We're very intelligent beings that are here to express that. You know what I mean? We don't need a piece of paper to remind us, right, of the truth of something.
I mean, I agree with you. And then look at how people are acting.
Right.
So,
but yeah.
You know, look at what's happening and looking at how many of our civil liberties are being trounced upon. I understand what you're saying because you're coming from a much higher, more expansive nuance. And yes, it's problematic. And yes, our country is problematic. And no, it isn't free in all of them things.
You know what else I find problematic? The word problematic. like that's the kind of thing, like, you always hear from somebody who's, like, in gender studies or critical theory or whatever. Oh my God, this person's work is so problematic.
You know what? This is actually relevant to what we're talking about. Is like,
totally.
We can't get rid of these words entirely because dumbasses misuse them or overuse them or whatnot, you know?
Yeah. But it is funny, like, we're, you know, like, we're in a fishbowl and it's like there's this many words to explain our experiences, right? And so we're forced to use some of the ones that have been horribly misappropriated by
How about the situation is frustrating as fuck? If it's not problematic, it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
And maddening to bear witness to. And just the sham, like, I'm so disappointed in Brett because I felt like he was the last one that I could believe in and have faith in. And I just feel like he completely sold out the truth and sold out integrity, and yuck.
Yeah. I just wonder about whether he realizes that he's done that. Like, I just keep thinking,
I think his brother patted him on the back and he feels like he did a great job.
Yeah, it's like, when you're just saying that last sentence, like, I was hearing, like, you remember that song from Annie when that dog follows her and she's like, "Dumb dog, why are you following me?" You know what I mean? And, like, eventually she gets used to the dog and gives him a little pat or whatever. Like, it's the same kind of shit. Yeah. All right. Are we complete here?
Yeah, I feel complete. Thanks for jumping on for our last minute afterwards.
Absolutely. So I hope you guys enjoyed the bonus little bit of content, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this spectacular shit show of a podcast that they did. I will link to it in the description. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Bye.